Well, at least as far as second half of back-to-backs go, that was the best one by far this season for the Kraken. It's a low bar. They're now 0-9-0, so a really low bar, but it was the best one they've played all season, and by a pretty wide margin. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Kraken do lose the second half of a back-to-back to fall to that 0-9-0, 4-1 to the Tampa Bay Lightning in a game that honestly was a lot closer than that 4-1 score would suggest. There is one empty netter at the end that helps push it a little bit more in that direction, but quite honestly, I feel like the Kraken outplayed the Lightning for the vast majority of this game, and well, they just got goaltendered by one of the best goaltenders the NHL has to offer in Andrei Vasilevskiy, who put on display why he is every season one of the players you're going to look at for a Vezina candidate going into it. But for a Kraken team that is, well, let's call it like it has been downright terrible in the second half of back-to-backs this season, not just that 0-9-0 record that I've now pointed out a few times, but it's bad enough that it kind of bears repeating. They are also, by my count, a minus 21 goal differential in those 9 losses, having been shut out in the first 3 of them. And yeah, really not looked competitive in just about any of them, including the one where they only lost by the 1 goal. And even in this one, sure, they lose by 3, 2 if you discount the empty netter. Not only did they play a competitive game with a good Lightning team throughout the entirety of it, regardless of what the scoreboard looked like towards the end of the third period, well, they outplayed the Lightning for good chunks of it, and some of that was, I kind of think the Lightning got away with one here. They did look a bit sloppy, lots of turnovers in their own end of the ice, and just generally not transitioning particularly well like you're used to seeing that team play. Their first game back from the break, and they had a couple players in the Four Nations tournament, not nearly as many as the Panthers, but still some rust being knocked off there for that team. The Kraken, though, were able to take advantage of that and looked generally pretty sharp. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it may be one of the best 60 minutes the team has played all season long. With really the one exception being that offensively they didn't do nearly enough to get in Vasilevskiy's face and take away his ability to see the shots coming in, which they got a lot of shots on net, 37 by the end of the game. Vasilevskiy stopping 36 of them, including the first 35, so the Kraken just had a really hard time getting anything past him, and even with some, actually a pretty good number of shots from dangerous locations, they just weren't getting that net front presence to force him to try and look through screens or just, throw an arm out and hope for the best because he can't see the shot coming, which is something the Lightning were doing a little bit better job of in front of Stezka, who was playing his first NHL game for the Kraken at the other end of the ice. Which, as far as that's concerned and how Stezka played in this game, I don't think there's any way around the fact that the difference in this game and why the Lightning won it was the goaltending. But that really says a lot more about how Vasilevskiy played in this game than it does how Stezka played, who honestly, I think played a pretty good game, especially for his first NHL game, and especially against a team like the Lightning. And yeah, one of the goals that he lets in, the first one that he lets in, is maybe one that you like back. It's a bit of a soft goal, but it did take him nearly halfway through the game to give up that goal, and by that point, he'd already made a couple of grade A, very nice saves, and would make a couple more throughout the game, so he more than made up for that. Just unfortunately, at the other end of the ice, Vasilevskiy was in prime form, which for him is pretty much unbeatable. There's a reason he's won a couple of Vezinas, and that team has won a couple Stanley Cups with him in net. Now jumping into the game itself, with the only change in lineup for the Kraken being Stezka going into net instead of Decord, with it being the second half of a back-to-back, so everything else looks the same, which is kind of notable, especially with the 2 guys coming back from injury, Evans and especially Eberle having missed all that time, and then coming right into back-to-back games against good teams in Florida. And you did see a reduction in ice time in this game. He played about 14 minutes in the previous game in Florida and played 2 to 2.5 minutes less than that here in Tampa Bay, and was much less noticeable in this game. In fact, I really hardly noticed Eberle at all over the course of it. Heck, I think I even noticed Mitchell Stevens more than Eberle in this game, and he played less than half the ice time that Eberle did. But again, it's his second game back in back-to-back nights after missing multiple months with the injury and the rehab, the surgery, and all that. So even if it is a step back from what I thought was a pretty good return in his first game back in Florida, it was clear that there's still a lot of rust that needs to be knocked off here in his second game in Tampa Bay. We'll see what things look like with a day's rest when they come back to play the Blues here in the last game of the road trip, before getting 3 days of rest before coming back home at the start of March to play the Canucks. So at least for Eberle's sake anyway, aside from the 3 games in 4 days immediately, things space out a little bit here as the rest of this return to play keeps going with those 3 days off between the road trip and the homestand, and then I'm pretty sure they have 2 days off between the first game of the homestand and the second one, so not nearly as compact as we've seen most of the season, which has been pretty much every other day and then back-to-backs thrown in. And we'll get back to that as things continue, just the price you pay for the 2-week break in the middle of the season, which as it turns out was well worth it because of the fantastic tournament that we got to watch during that break. Either way, getting back to the game itself, for the Kraken, they get off to a good start in this first period. Overall, another very good first period for the Kraken, their second one back from the break, which is not something we've been used to over the course of the season. And it's an up and down first period, which often can mean that it's been up and down, back and forth. But this one is pretty much the Kraken dominate the first period for the first half of it. Maybe dominates a little bit of an exaggeration, but the Kraken definitely control play and get the vast majority of the chances on net for the first half of this first period, and about halfway through, things turn around and go back the other way, with the Lightning getting the majority of the chances. Fortunately, though, Stezka's up to the task, makes every save he needs to. Vasilevsky answers at the other end, and we get to the end of the first period with the score still 0-0. Which again, given how things have generally gone this season for the Kraken in the first, and given that you have a first NHL game, first NHL period goaltender in net, that's a pretty good result for a first period from the Kraken. Of course, as we know, while the first period hasn't necessarily always been their friend, the second period has really been their enemy so far this season. But this second period, I mean, scoreboard aside, this second period is one of the best second periods the Kraken have played all season long. They do, I don't think with any exaggeration, dominate the Lightning in this period. Again, aside from the scoreboard, Vasilevsky bails the Lightning out on a number of occasions in this second period. And midway through it, after Vasilevsky had come up with a couple of grade A saves, absolutely robbing, I can't remember who, McCann, I think, on one case, who again is having a hard time finding the back of the net, even though he's getting lots of good opportunities. The first line continuing to produce for the Kraken. Generally the usual suspects getting the Kraken those opportunities, but Vasilevsky just wasn't having any of it. The Kraken eventually get the lone power play of the game. And immediately on that power play, they lose the face-off back. And then it has to be said, a very nice backhand behind the back rainbow pass from down in the corner along the boards, catching a player, Hagel, in stride as he skates into it in the neutral zone, and then gets about a half a step on Bjorkstrand on the way back. Bjorkstrand's still able to box him out pretty well as he gets up towards the net on that shorthanded rush, but he still turns his back to the net and then just sneakily flips it around and throws it on that backhand, catches Stezka off guard. It goes through the 5-hole and into the back of the net to give the Lightning their 10th shorthanded goal of the season, and also the 1-0 lead in this game. It has to be said, this kind of just feels like a metaphor for the Kraken special teams this season, that they play a pretty good game, one of their best first 30 minutes of a game all season, and then still end up down 1-0 because of all things, their power play getting its first opportunity of the night. The Kraken special teams wise, it's been another adventure of a season, and not in a good way. Now, that having been said, the power play, the rest of this power play is fantastic. I guess for what it's worth, they build off of one of the best power plays of the season, their only power play in the previous game in Florida. Again, this power play looked very dangerous. They do pretty much everything short of getting the puck in the net. Lots of good chances, good puck movement. A couple very good saves from Vasilevsky are the only reason they don't score on it, to at least even things up on this one special teams opportunity of the game. But that shorthanded chance, that it is a sneaky shot from Hagel, but still is probably one that Stezka would like to have back. He still had made a couple of very nice saves. He had one huge save on a cross-seam pass in the first period that he just read very well. Kind of a similar thing to what we've gotten used to seeing with Decord, where he'll make these saves where it looks nonchalant, but you see how the whole setup happened, and you are kind of amazed that he's in that spot to make the save when he is. It was a similarly nice save, just positioning-wise, and ability to read the play from Stezka to make that save in the first period, and had another good one early on in the second before the Kraken really started to take things over. Unfortunately, that one shorthanded does sneak through him. The Kraken continue the momentum coming out of that power play that they're unable to score on, but still just can't find a way past Vasilevsky. and we get to the third with the Kraken down 1-0. But as we know, it's the third period where the Kraken make the magic happen. That's where they have the comeback, make the game interesting, and maybe even end up winning it. But it just wasn't meant to be this time. Again, Vezina performance in net at the other end of the ice. Some very good shots. Yeah, again, like I said at the beginning of the game, the one big complaint for the Kraken offensively is nowhere near enough net front presence to force Vasilevsky to move around in the crease to look around screens or to try and get tips or at least be available for any rebounds, which, to be fair, Vasilevsky really was not allowing much as far as any rebounds are concerned, but still just having traffic in front of the net to muddy things up and make his job at least a little bit more difficult could have potentially helped. It certainly couldn't have hurt based on the first 35 shots ending up being saved by him. And eventually the Lightning do find, with all of the talent that they have offensively, a couple more ways to find the back of the net. First goal of the third period being a prime example of that. About halfway through, it's a one face-off cleanly won by Braden Point away from, I want to say it was Matty Beniers on the other side. He wins it clean out to Kucherov, and I'm sure they had this dialed up that if that face-off was won clean back to Kucherov, he was ready to wind up and fire it on net. That's just what he does. Through a screen, it goes through a pair of legs and then off of one of Dunn's legs and into the near side of the net past Stezka, who has absolutely no chance here. He can barely see the shot coming, much less where the puck is by the time it goes off Dunn's leg, and it's 2-0 Lightning. And then not even 2 minutes later, it's a repeat of how Florida scored their lone goal in the previous game. A little bit better defended this time. It's the pairing of Evans and Mahura, who are both much closer to their respective players on this rush chance, but it's a similar one of a pass from along the boards, kind of by the face-off circle, getting out in front of the net, where a nicely placed stick on the ice tips it in over the glove hand and into the top near side of the net, this time past Stezka, to make it 3-0 Lightning, which already 2-0 felt like it was going to be quite a hill for the Kraken to climb given how Vasilevsky was playing at the other end of the ice. But 3-0, you kind of knew it was over at that point. Barring a miracle, Vasilevsky just completely falling apart in the last few minutes of the game. That pretty much was going to do it. The Kraken do at least end up breaking up the shutout before they pull the goaltender for the empty net. It's, once again, the right line out there making it happen. If the Kraken score points in a game, you can bet that Shane Wright's going to at least get on the score sheet for one of those, it seems, and that's just what he does here, as he ends up tipping in a shot from Montour, and it's a perfect tip too, right into the near side top corner. It could hardly have been better placed if he was looking at the net, picking his spot and shooting it himself. So Wright picks up his 13th of the season, and on top of that, as you can tell by the screenshot, this is a perfect example of what the Kraken might have been able to accomplish the entire rest of the game had they gotten a little bit more net front presence when they were getting their offensive opportunities, as now you finally have two players going to the front of the net. I mean, Shane Wright's kind of more in the vicinity than actually in front of the net. He's at least in the low slot where he gets the tip on this puck, which still, that change of direction that close to the net really gives Vasilevsky absolutely no chance if it doesn't hit him, and it doesn't, it hits the back of the net. But you also have on the far side Tolvanen, who's screening Vasilevsky, or was, as Mahura is the one over to the far side that passes this out to Montour. So while Mahura had the puck, you've got Tolvanen right in Vasilevsky's face, forcing him to stand up to look over Tolvanen. That's why he's looking over everybody and up out of what you would generally see a goaltender kind of in that squatted position, taking as much of the net away. He has to look over people, and that helps this puck end up in the back of the net. So you've got the one screen from Tolvanen and then the tip from Wright. Suddenly they get some net front presence, and wouldn't you know, they break up the shutout. Again, Wright picks up another point, still now over a point per game, 13 points in his last 12 games, so he continues to produce offensively for the Kraken. And as we talked about in the previous one, just generally taking big steps forward in his NHL development, having what has now become a pretty good season for him, especially here in the back half of it as we have gotten farther and farther into it. Unfortunately for the Kraken, though, this is as far as the comeback would go. They do pretty quickly after this pull Stezka. Quickly, the Lightning find the back of the net, though the first one gets called back for an offside, so the Kraken come up good with another challenge in back-to-back nights. At least the video crew, the replay team for the Kraken, is now 2 for 2, 2 games in a row, taking goals off the board from the opposing team, which is good to see from an organizational standpoint, I suppose. They get that one right. Unfortunately, the Kraken are not able to really make anything of that second chance, and eventually the Lightning do find the back of the net. This one is skated into the other end of the ice with absolutely no question of whether or not it was offside, and then skated into the net without a Kraken in sight. I mean, it's just it's an empty net goal. It's not like it really matters how it ends up happening. The Lightning, I guess, to the Kraken credit, the second empty net goal, the one that does end up counting, does come pretty much immediately after McCann puts it off the inside of the top corner of the post. Maybe if that's just an inch closer to the inside of the net, then the Kraken pulled it within one, and you never know what happens in the last minute and a half of the game, but instead it bounces off the post out to a Lightning player who passes it up to another, and it gets skated into the empty net to make it 4-1 Lightning and get us to that final score. As far as puck luck is concerned, well, yeah, McCann hits the post here, which is unfortunate, but the Kraken, the post behind Stezka definitely helped him out a little bit here in his NHL debut. Braden Point had, I mean, Stezka had made a couple of pretty good saves, but Braden Point made a very nice play midway through, I want to say, the second period to get behind the entire Kraken team. He's one-on-one with Stezka, gets him to the ice with a nice move going from one side of the net to the other, and then puts it off the near post. So the Kraken caught their breaks throughout this game as well. Still a really well-played 60 minutes from the team. Aside of what the scoreboard looks like at the end, the Kraken massively outshoot the Lightning in this game. By the end of it, outshooting the Lightning at 37-23. And for the vast majority of the game, even deep into the third period, they were outshooting the Lightning 2-1. I think at one point it was 34 shots to 17. So the Lightning had a little bit of flurry towards the end of the game, but yeah, it ends up with a 4-1 Kraken loss, which in the grand scheme of things, considering they're not going to the playoffs anyway, is probably for the best. You get a very good game from the team. You like a lot of how the Kraken played this one, and at the end you get a little bit closer to a better draft spot. Oh, and also you managed to get some scoring, in this case all of your scoring, since you only scored the one time, from the future core of your team. One of the younger players, Shane Wright, your youngest player right now, getting another point, continuing to build off of a hot offensive streak for him and picking up goals and assists. And the primary assist also comes from someone that's going to be a long-term part of your team going forward. Not one of the younger players in Brandon Montour, a veteran, but someone that you have signed to a 7-year contract. So yeah, you're getting contributions from players that are going to be a part of this team, and that's a helpful sign as well, even in losses. And you know what, speaking of those two, as we get to the Kraken 3 stars and close things out here, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help decide who the Kraken 3 stars are after every game, or help decide who the Channel Kraken Awards are at the end of the season, you can support a little more than you already are by watching to this point, which I very much appreciate, by also going to the link down below and supporting on Patreon as well. Those two have to be my first 2 stars. I'm going to go with Montour as the first star. He had a very strong game after a not particularly great game in the first game back in Florida. This one was much better. He was fantastic for the Kraken all night long. And then Shane Wright, I mean, like I said, continues to build off of a very strong stretch here, but generally a steady uphill slope that he's had going on now for the last 20 to 30 games, going back to when he got scratched. The scoring didn't all come right away, but he definitely looked a little bit more comfortable as he got into those first couple of weeks. I mean, he did score a couple of times pretty much right after he came back from being scratched, but he started to look more and more comfortable, and then the points started to come, and now here we are where he is 12 games of over a point per game. So yeah, things are going pretty well for Shane Wright and the rest of the players as well. Capo Caco, that line with Matty Beniers, again, had plenty of chances in this game. Just the goaltending at the other end was a little bit too much for the Kraken to score as consistently as they would like to. It doesn't help that it seemed pretty clear that the Lightning were going to put their top defensive pair out there as much as they possibly could against Beniers and Caco. It seemed like any time that Caco had the puck, Victor Hedman was right there on top of him. So you can tell that they are drawing the top opposing players, and that helps Shane Wright a little bit. He gets a little bit more sheltered minutes, even with still getting, well, actually 14 minutes tonight, so a little bit more than he has been getting on average. But it helps Wright a little bit that he isn't facing the top players from every opposing team like we were seeing Beniers face in kind of the back half of his rookie season and pretty much all of last year, and still pretty much all of this year, as he is a part of that top line. Then, as far as the third star, I mean, there's a number of guys you could go with, and I think the Kraken played well enough that even with the one goal, we can still get 3 stars. But even with the loss, and even if the opposing goaltender was way better, I'm going to give it to Ales Stezka. He did play very well. I thought gave the Kraken every chance they needed to get a lead and kind of take this game in that direction as opposed to where it ended up going because of how the opposing goaltender played. But Stezka had a very good NHL debut. He saved 19 of the first 20 shots. I think it was the 21st or maybe it was the 20th shot that was the one off the faceoff that gets past him. But for the vast majority of this game, he had a save percentage that's something we'd be used to looking at from Decord. Now, by the end of the game, his save percentage doesn't necessarily look fantastic, but I think he really did play very well against a good team. And in his NHL debut, you know what? I think it's more than fair to give him that third star. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars would be, what you thought of this game, what you thought of Stezka in his NHL debut. If you're a Coachella Valley Firebirds fan, have seen a lot of him, maybe what you thought of watching the goaltender you've seen a lot in Coachella play up here with the Kraken and get that chance. A fairly late NHL debut at the age of 28, so good on him to keep with it and earn that start even late in his professional hockey career. It's, I'm sure, something he'll never forget, and he played well even if the result wasn't there for the team. With that, though, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy the video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that helps support the channel, so I'd appreciate using them. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other. God bless, and go Kraken.